Here we're going to tie a pheasant tail. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my thread started near the eye of the hook, or the thorax region. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in the tails. For that we're going to use some pheasant tail. We're going to pull off a generous clump of fibers, about 10 or so. Smaller the fly you're going to tie, the fewer fibers that you use. Here I'm tying like a 14 or 16 or so, so I'm going to use a fairly generous amount of pheasant tail fibers. If I'm tying like a 20, you'll only use a few, maybe 3, 4 fibers or so. First thing you're going to do is you're going to measure out those fibers. You want them to be roughly half the length of the shank of the hook. So just measure those out and then roughly place them where I want them to end up. And I'm going to tie those right on top of the shank of the hook. Pull those fibers up as I wrap back up on them. That'll help keep them from rolling from side to side and keep them on top of the hook. And you can trim out the excess. And I take my thread back forward real fast, and then I'm going to tie in the rib. I took my thread forward just so I keep the body nice and smooth and even. That way I don't have a lump in the rear of the fly if I tied in the wire at the back. Then I just tie this wire along the side of the hook all the way to the tail. Now we're ready for the body, which is also pheasant tail. Here I take another generous clump of 10 or so fibers and I trim off the tips so they're nice and even. I have a nice blunt end of tips. And I'm going to tie these in at the rear of the fly just by the tips. Secure those and take my thread forward, keeping the body nice and even. I'm going to stop at the thorax region of the fly here. I take these pheasant tail fibers, I wrap them around the shank of the hook, go forward with it, and I can stop and capture those fibers at the thorax, trim out the excess. Now I can counter wrap my copper wire here. There we go. I'm going to wrap it the opposite way that I wrapped the pheasant tail on the body. This will lock the pheasant tail in place, keep it from unraveling. Once I've counter wrapped it, I can capture the copper wire. Break it off. I can simply just twist it out of there. Now the next step is to tie in the casing material, which is also, of course, pheasant tail once again. Use another generous clump. And I again cut off the tips, and I cut tips down a little bit farther on this one so I get a little bit more of the thicker part of the feather. And I kind of spread this out so I get a bit of a coverage on my thorax here, so when I pull it forward it covers the whole top of the fly. And I want my thorax to be about 1/3 of the length of the fly. I don't want it to be any more than that or any less than that. Then the next step is to tie in the actual thorax material, which is just some Peacock Herl. I'm going to tie this in by the tips. I'm just going to use a couple of fibers here. I take my thread forward to the eye, and I wrap this Peacock, one each wrap right in front of the other. build up a bit of a thorax. There we go. Then I can hold down my thread nice and tight, and I can break off these pieces of peacock. And the next step is to pull the pheasant tail over the top of the fly. This makes our casing. And then the next part, I make the legs, and I do so by pulling a fiber of pheasant tail to the side. There we go. I can lash it down. Do that on each side. That'll make our leg. There we go. And I can trim out the excess at the head of the fly. And I'll just clean it up. Now we're ready to whip finish the fly. And then I can trim my legs. I like them to just be a hair longer than the thorax. And that is the pheasant tail. Very simple, easy fly to tie. One of my favorite and most effective nymphs to use out on the trout rivers here in the West.